Hello guys, and welcome to a new Broken Arrow video today by me, Vulcan. In this video I'm going to be going through all of the vehicles available in the vehicle tab. This is going to be somewhat a tutorial where I'm going to go through all of the units. We're going to talk about what they do, what they're good for, and then my opinions on these units. So starting off with the BMD2, it's a 35-point APC. It can carry 5 men to the front line. The great thing about this though is that it is very cheap. It's only 35 points for a 30mm autocannon with 14 health. Its armor's very low, but it can be upgraded for 10 points to have a Cornet M, which kind of makes it into sort of this weird pseudo HGM vehicle, because it has 1,800 meter range with 1,200 millimeters of explosive penetration, which is a lot. And it can fire both these at the same time, because you'll notice here, missiles per target 2. So this ripple fires both the Cornets at the same target, and then the first will generally get defeated by APS, second one will go through. If your opposing unit doesn't have APS, this can side shot a tank in 2 shots. So it's actually kind of a scary HGM. And for 45 points, you're probably wondering why people don't use this more often. And it's generally because of its low armor. It's quite easy to kill. Enemy infantry 80 is going to take it out very easily. But I imagine these sorts of cheaper units will find a way into the high level game, because they're so cheap and cost efficient at range. So on certain maps, these could be extremely useful. If you have supply further back, you have like 3 of them or 4 of them that just volley fire Cornets at people. You bring them back to supply, get them resupplied, go back forwards again, and maybe you can get value out of them that way. Also the 30mm, nothing to scoff at. The 30mm on the Russian side can do a lot of damage to infantry very quickly, and you can keep them at range 1,000 meters. Moving on to the BMD4M. This is another unit that I feel like is reasonable value for money, but not as good value for money as something like the BMD, because the BMD2 that is. Because the BMD4, it has 60 front armor, but it still maintains like pretty bad side armor, rear armor, and top armor. So it's going to die pretty quickly. It's got the same amount of health at 14. You can up armor it for a little bit extra health, a little bit extra armor, and it's probably worth doing that if you're going to use it, because it's only 5 points. But otherwise, yeah, this is just sort of a autocannon fire support unit. The 100mm fires HE at enemy infantry, and then also blasts them with 30mm autocannon fire. So in an anti-infantry meta, this is actually pretty strong. And then the Arcan's there for long-range anti-tank purposes. So yeah, I'm not sure where I sit on this at the moment, but I feel like, you know, we could see more use of these units like this. It just depends on the choice of units that you want to use to supplement your infantry. And I feel like maybe the BMD4M is still a little bit on the expensive side for how soft a target it is. Moving over to the BTR. Pretty useful 10-man transport. It has 2 PKTs, you can see them in the front here, so it has to be facing its target to use them. It can be upgraded to have a cord and a grenade launcher, which is actually a pretty nice combo for 45 points. So if you want to use it as a troop transport, I'd probably recommend upgrading it so it can provide that autocannon fire, well not autocannon, grenade launcher fire, and the cord machine gun fire as well. Then we have the BTR MDM Rakushka. This is a pretty nice transport as well, because it can carry 15 men. In the decks where you have these, you can basically just use them as drop-off troop transports to the front line. Wouldn't necessarily recommend like driving them into harm's way, because they're not like particularly tanky, just like the BMDs, and you don't really have like a solid weapon. Although you can upgrade them for fire support if you want to put like a ZU 23-2 on them. You can also upgrade that to the 2M variant. The 2M variant slightly longer range, and then you've got the 2M with Igla. And then it just becomes like an anti-air platform for 100 points, which is actually, I feel, kind of expensive for what it does. Then we've got the BTR robot, which is probably one of the most cost-efficient HGM vehicles in the game, just because you can bring it in with like another HGM unit, and you can put a Cornet M on it. And the Cornet M, again, 1,800 meters range, 1,200 millimeters explosive damage penetration. And so this actually gets 4 missiles, and so it can kind of sit there and poke away at units at a distance, and doesn't really have to get close. You know, you're not going to ever really get into range to use the PKT. If you do, you're kind of in trouble. Usually you're going to be dropping this off dropping off whatever's inside this at range, because it would come with, like, I don't know, Igla squads or you know, HGMs, that kind of thing is what you'd probably use a BTR for. And then you just keep it at range with the Cornet M to use up those missiles. I actually kind of like this as sort of like a cheap support vehicle. Screzet, another one that's really good value, cheap support. So for 50 points, you get 2 PKTs on the front again. You get the 1000 meter versus ground targets ZG-23-2, which is great for ripping through light targets and infantry. So really, really nice. Also providing the 1200 meter range against helicopters. Not really going to use it against aircraft much because usually they're too fast. You can upgrade it to the ZU-23-2M, which might be a recommendation from me actually, because the extra 100 meters range does make a big difference when you're fighting enemy helicopters with rockets. And then you can also put an Igla on it as well, but then it starts to get a bit pricey, in my opinion, when you could just have the Screzet with Igla squads in it to begin with. But I think the 5-point upgrade, probably worth it. Then the Cornet D1, actually a pretty strong unit, because it can, again, ripple fire very well. You can do 2 missiles per target, and its aim time's pretty quick. It has to be stationary in order to fire though, so bear that in mind, but it comes with the Cornet with the same penetration and range as I've mentioned a couple times already. It also does get a HE variant of the missile, which can target infantry at range, but only has 4 ammo for those. Now the ammo on these can get used up very, very quickly, because say it fires like 2 missiles at a target and then it gets smoked, you know, you already lost a quarter of your payload, so it's not ideal. You can also upgrade it to the 2x4 Cornet, and then this gets pretty nutty, because against like a heavy tank, this thing can launch like 4 Cornets at the same time. Again, you have to be careful of ammo count, because in this case, if 4 of the missiles get smoked, which can happen, then you've used up a third of your payload in this vehicle. Now bear in mind, none of these have very good stealth, so you want to keep them at max range, otherwise you're going to be having a bad time. Now this one's interesting because the Cornet HGM with the 2x4 is actually shorter range at 1600 meters, whilst the Cornet with the optics has the 1800 meters. So yeah, use that sort of thought to your advantage. I do like to have it with the extra, because I feel like 1000 millimeters explosive damage penetration is good enough, and if your opponent's not paying attention, 4 of these slam into a super heavy tank on the American side, and they will kill them. So yeah, it's a good HGM vehicle. It's maybe a little bit pricey in some situations, but I like having 1 or 2 of them in the deck sometimes. Then we have the Sprut. Now the Sprut is an interesting one because it can be upgraded to have a very good gun. The Sprut SDM has a 425 to 680 millimeter kinetic penetration gun, which can also fire the HGM at 1600 meters as well for 100 points. And in support of other tanks, this can be really, really useful. You can see here the downgrade is only 375 to 600 millimeters, and so that's really not going to be as effective to start doing damage to heavier tanks. But the Sprut SDM really does make a big difference. You can pop the armor on it. The armor does actually make quite a big difference to your sort of heat protection. It doesn't add too much armor, so I don't think it's necessarily needed. I like them at the 100 point cost. These can also still be airdropped if you don't have the cage armor on. One thing to note is that cage armor quite often increases health, so in this case maybe the 15 points is worth it because of that. But yeah, you're also sometimes sacrificing speed, and in this case the airdrop ability. The airdrop ability, I don't know if it really matters too much when it comes to the Sprut, to be honest. But yeah, keeping these cheap and cheerful in support is probably the way that I like to play them, because then if they get targeted, it's not a big loss if they die, and they will get clustered quite a lot if you have them in groups. Then we have the B10 Kurganets. This is a very strong APC. It has 8 seats, so it can carry some pretty nasty squads like SSO and Guards Monostroki, and I'm just trying to think of other decent squads that the Russians have like vampire squads and stuff, but I think vampire is actually a smaller squad. But yeah, there are quite a lot of nice 8-man squads that the B10s can carry. It can fit like 2 Desaniki in it, for example, with the ambushes, and that's like 2 4-man squads. So yeah, those sorts of combinations are really nice with units like this. Now, definitely worth upgrading from the Cord MG to like the Boomerang module, or even the Epocha, which is the 57mm. This thing can absolutely slap the side armor and rear armor of heavy tanks, especially considering you get 4 Cornet missiles and the Bulat. And the Cornet missiles are going to overwhelm tanks pretty easily. And since you have a decent amount of front armor for an APC, it's going to take you a couple shots to die in this. So you're always going to get at least 1 volley towards the enemy target and force them to smoke. If they don't smoke, they're taking a lot of damage for free. And then the Bulat is nice because not only does it help you kill enemy infantry, it can trigger APS. So when you're firing at an enemy tank, it's firing the Bulat and the Cornet M's. Now the first volley of Cornet M's will always be the first to hit APS, so it'll be like Cornet hits APS, second Cornet gets through, then Bulat is fired, triggers the second APS, and then the 2 extra Cornets afterwards usually get through. Like if that's just like a head-on engagement, I think that's how it works roughly. Obviously, you know, depending on smoke or line of sight, that can change. But the point being is that these can be very scary for tanks, and considering it's only 105 points at this moment, that's pretty good. You can add the Afghanet Active Protection as well, and the Afghanet Active Protection is really, really good value for 35 points because it has 4 charges, which for a vehicle like this is very, very nice indeed. So you've got a tanky APC with a good gun and lots of active protection, and it probably needs a little bit of a price nerf. Then we have the BMOT. This is just basically a tank hull made for carrying infantry. It's got 8 seats. It's very useful for dropping engineers into buildings because you can utilize that front armor to your advantage. You can also add like 1 health for 5 points, which is probably worth doing. You also get some extra heat protection on the sides. There is also the upgraded engine, which could also be worth considering because it is quite slow without it. But generally, I'm seeing people use like variants of the B15 or like the Boomerang or, you know, other vehicles rather than the BMO, just because it is kind of slow. Although it can, you know, push infantry to the front line. It's just for 75 points, it's not really doing much for you in terms of damage. It's just kind of like a safe-ish carrier that you can use to get troops about the place. Then we have the BMPT Terminator 2. This is a absolute monster against infantry in buildings because of its twin 30mm. So I was saying how like you can team up BMD2s and take out infantry. It's the same with the Terminator, except for it can do it by itself because it's got twin 30mm and then PKT, and I would almost recommend always getting the grenade launchers on it as well, because then you've got twin 30mm and twin grenade launcher, and that can absolutely slap infantry about. Upgrading to the explosive reactive armor is also a good idea because of the 18 health, so that's something as well. So yeah, really solid infantry killer. The biggest thing that lets this down is that it's going to die to tanks because the attacker doesn't really fire fast enough, and also the APS is non-existent here. If this had APS as well, it would be a monster. Then we have the Cornet T, which is a pretty good HGM vehicle. You're initially stuck with the standard of 1,600mm range with 1,000mm of explosive penetration, but I see a lot of people like to upgrade this to the Kriz, and the Krizan Tema has 1,700m range with 1,100mm explosive damage. It can fire 2 missiles per target, and it can target multiple targets at the same time. For 80 points, it's pretty nice. You can also up armor it to get an extra 2 health and some extra armor. So yeah, this thing can do a lot of damage at range. I don't think necessarily you need to pay extra 15 points for this unit when you're going to keep it at max range most of the time. You know, generally you want to add armor or add health when you're going to get into range of enemy AT, like close range AT, like infantry, RPGs, and like Moors and stuff like that. When you're sat at range here, it's not as important because you're always going to be able to survive probably at least one hit and then get out of there. And if if you get hit by more than one thing, then you're probably dead already. So that's the kind of mindset that I go in. Now we got the big boy, the T14 Armata. So this thing is pretty good. Like, we've got to basically compare this to the best of the Americans, and that is the M1A2 SEP V3. So I'm just going to pin this while we do this. So the Armata has 500 to 800 millimeters of kinetic damage. Upgrading to the Sokol V attack missile doesn't change the gun at all, so just bear that in mind. What we're looking at here basically, and the way that these two tanks work against each other, is the M1A2 has slightly more penetration. And that makes a big difference in close range brawls because both have 850 frontal kinetic armor. And the M1A2 SEP V3 is almost always going to be doing its full damage because it has enough penetration at close range to defeat the 850 millimeters of frontal armor. Whereas that is not the case for the Armata. It's always going to be like 50 millimeters short, which means this damage is going to be lower because of that. So in a brawl, the M1A2 will defeat an Armata. It's doing more damage. It's going to cause stress for the Armata. But one thing that's nice about the Armata is it does have an auto loader. And this is important because it allows, if you manage to maintain line of sight on the enemy, even if you are stressed, it doesn't affect the impact of loading in this weapon, whilst the Abrams will still be affected by that. So there's this interesting dynamic with brawling where the American player wants to peek forwards, shoot, and pull back into smoke, whereas the Armata wants to continue to sit on top of the enemy tank to maintain its rate of fire. And it's a difficult balance because obviously there's a lot of other factors. When you've got two heavy tanks dueling, you're going to see like aircraft coming in, you're going to have helicopters swinging around. Like, there's going to be a lot of external factors, but one-on-one, these are the things that you need to pay attention to. But the Armata on its own is basically the best that the Russians get. So you can't ignore it, even though it is quite expensive. You have to get the 800mm on target. In terms of the HGM, it's really up to you. Like, the Sprinter is good enough to kill soft targets at range. The Sokol can catch out tanks that don't have APS. Like, particularly at the moment, you'll see a lot of sort of top tier players take maybe 2 tanks with APS and the rest don't. And then the Sokol V can sometimes exploit that at range with 1,600 meters. Just bear in mind that most of the time when you hit an enemy tank at that range, that tank's going to have time to retreat. So it's more of like a balancing act whether or not you actually need that. In my opinion, the only thing you really need to do for the Armata is upgrade its armor, because it gives you 19 health and it increases your defense against HGMs in the front armor. So that's pretty handy as well. It does actually increase your side armor quite significantly as well, which might help you against enemy AT infantry. So yeah, 400 points. Armata's pretty decent. Then we have the Barbarous, the big scary Barbarous, the Barbarous that everybody hates. I don't think it's that bad, personally. I think by default, you know, the Barbarous for 225 points is a nice troop carrier with its 30mm, with its Cornet. But the way that you want to use this is almost always upgrading it to the Kinzhal. The Kinzhal's 57, just like with the B-15, is extremely good at engaging enemy armor in the side and rear. And the way that you would use a Barbarous is in conjunction with another tank or two. So say you would have like T-80s, T-90s or Armatas running at the front armor of the enemy tanks. And then the Barbarous is going to whip around the flanks and start shooting them in the side armor. And it does have a reasonable amount of speed considering how big and well armored it is. It's got 80 speed and 40 in reverse. So yeah, pretty nifty beast with a lot of firepower. Now its HGM with the upgrade, the Kinzhal, is not very good. Like, it's just the attacker, it fires like one at a time and it generally gets defeated by APS or smoke quite easily. But the 57 is really what you need here. It comes with 4 APS charges by default and 2 smoke. Same goes for the Armata actually, that gets 4 APS and 2 smoke. Maybe at some point we'll see APS get nerfed. I would like to see this come down to like 3. Same for the Afghanet system on the B-15, that should probably be 3 or even 2 because it's just a bit ridiculous sometimes. But overall, you know, I feel like Russian tanks will lose out to American armor if both players are of a high level. Then we have the T-80U. T-80U is actually a really interesting tank because there are some interesting loadouts. You've got like the base loadout here, which has like a pretty naff gun for 200 points, honestly. So I wouldn't take this, but the T-80UM comes with 2 machine guns. Now, the reason that I'd always upgrade like an American tank, for example, is because the Tusk not only gives more health, but it also gives a second 50 cal. Whereas the T-80UM here, you can get a second cord for 215 points on this tank. You're not really getting like much of a better gun here, although I think it technically is better. No, it's actually not. But it does make a huge difference having the second machine gun for infantry fire support, whilst also being scary as a tank itself against light and medium targets. So yeah, I think the 15-point upgrade there is nice. You can also go for the Storer, which gives you it the 30% ECM, so that's just like a 30% chance for any income projectile to just miss. I don't know if this works against tanks, but sometimes I feel like it does, like against like main weapon systems. Like obviously this is direct shot, so it shouldn't get affected by something like ECM, but sometimes I feel like it does. I don't know if that's the case or if there's like some sort of bug or something sometimes, but either way, yeah, any sort of rocket, I mean, I've seen infantry miss these sorts of targets because of the ECM, so I don't know how that's really working right now, but if you favor RNG, then yeah, that's your go-to. And then you have the T-80UM, which comes with some active protection. You get 2 charges of active protection, and yeah, same gun. So yeah, this gun's really not good if you want to deal with any heavy armor, but it is a good tank, I think, for fire support in the T-80UM plus role. The other nice thing, of course, is that it does get the increased optics, which helps you spot infantry as well. Then we have the T-90, which is okay. Like again, it's kind of lacking in penetration, although you can upgrade it to the T-90A, and then you're looking at up to 640 millimeters of kinetic penetration, which is not a bad price, especially considering you're also getting extra health, you're getting extra front armor. 750 front armor is pretty nice. That's the same as like a set V2. So yeah, it's all right. You just got to be careful not to lose it to missiles. Although you do get some ECM, you don't get any active protection. Then we have the T-90M, which has that 720 millimeters kinetic penetration. The T-90M base variant is actually pretty good value for money when you compare it to some of the American equivalents. You probably do want to increase the health on it though with the additional explosive reactive armor. It goes from 17 to 18 health. And then if you want to, you can go all the way and add the active protection as well, which gives you, again, 4 charges of active protection. You get 800 millimeters of frontal armor, which is actually pretty big, but only a 720 millimeter penetration gun. So when you're fighting things on the highest level, yeah, it's not necessarily going to win still against something like an M1A2 set V2 because the V2 has more penetration. But I think I like the setup like this. Like 265 points for this setup is actually really good. So you have like your Armata or your Barbarous with all of like the APS. You have those go first, and then you have like the T-90Ms coming up the rear just to provide that extra DPS against enemy tanks. You can get some real good value out of them. Moving on to the BTR-82. This is actually a decent transport. I mean, you're getting a 30 mil for 55 points. It is quite expensive when you compare it to something like the BMD-2, but it can carry 8 men, and it is much more quick. Like you got 100 speed here. So those are the things that are going to make it more expensive. You can upgrade it to the BTR-82AT, and then it gets to Conquer's missiles, which can be quite useful as well. for an extra 10 points. You can also up armor it for 2 extra health, and also you know, the extra armor on the side there. So it actually doubles the front armor, which is quite significant. So yeah, it really kind of depends what you want to do with this. I kind of probably prefer it in this loadout where you have the main 30mm gun and then up armor for the extra health. It just becomes a really nice sort of support vehicle for the front line, and if it can break through, it can chew up units in the back line as well. Just bear in mind that it does lose its amphibious capability if you have the cage on it. Then we have the K16 boomerang. This boomerang can have the boomerang module, which has the 30mm and the conkers. Whenever you see like a unit with 2 or 4 conkers, they can be very, very powerful, and it's the same for the boomerang. I've killed like heavy tanks multiple times with these, because if you're actually using a range properly and your opponent doesn't smoke, they're going to get hit hard. And so the boomerang module is incredibly strong. It can also provide, of course, good 30mm fire support against infantry, and you can upgrade it. So up armoring it gives you extra 2 health and also more armor. And then you can go even further and add APS. Again, you get 4 charges, and this is what makes like both the boomerang and the Kurganets very obnoxious because of those APS charges. We've got the Toro Sorpiera. This unit, not ideal. You can kind of use it as like a throwaway fire support, I suppose. The actual damage on this thing isn't great. It does have a 1,200 meter range HE, heat, and AP shell, so you can use it for armor, infantry, and so on. You can put a 57 on it if you want to use it as like a AA. You can put it on an auto cannon with a grenade launcher, which could be interesting fire support, and you can also add a cornet, which does give you 4 cornets. So in this loadout, it's probably the most effective. And up armoring it does give you extra health. So yeah, 75 point Toros with the cornet. Yeah, maybe that's what you want to use it for. But overall, I haven't tested this unit that much. I think generally there are going to be better units that can benefit from this loadout of cornets better, like the B-15, like the boomerang. Like both of these are just like frontline fire support vehicles that drop off your standard infantry 8-man squads. Moving back to coastal, we have the BMP-3F. Kind of suffers in the same way as the BMD-4M in that it doesn't have like a decent value proposition. It is better value proposition than the BMD-4M. It's just straight up better in most cases, where you've got more front armor whilst also having the same guns, and then the PKTs on the front there as well. On the BMP, so you get 3 machine guns, and you get more passenger seats as well. Yeah, the whole thing is just like generally better. Actually, for BMP3 here, it's the difference is maybe you can up armor that for more health, whilst the BMP3 is always stuck at 14 health. That could make a difference. Like the health is a big problem because it means generally they're going to get 2-tapped or less by. Well, it's generally 2 taps by like rockets or something like that. The Sodema upgrade is definitely worth it, by the way, just because it reduces the dispersion, I think, on the auto cannon, which makes it generally more effective. Yeah, I'm looking at that correctly. 4.4 meters to 4.6, and then that's 4.3 to 5.2. So yeah, the dispersion's slightly better on the Sodema, and you've got a bit of extra range on that as well. 1,300 meter range, 1,600, and then this is like 1,200 and 1,500. So for 10 points, the upgrade's probably worth it. And then the storage ammo's just like if you want 30% ECM, which I don't know is worth it for 30 points. If you keep it at 75, I think this could be a great fire support vehicle in some cases, especially if there's like a specific battle group combination where this is one of your better transports. Moving on to the Conkers, this is okay on its own for 55 points if you have enough of them, but of course the upgrade is 100 times better. The Gevardet This thing is fantastic. You know, you've got 70-point unit with the Cornet, which has 1,600 meters effective range, 1,000 millimeters explosive damage. You're going to pick off vehicles just like the same way you would with a B-15 Kurganets or a Boomerang with the Cornets. And this actually gets more ammo, so it can reload at least once on each of those launchers. So yeah, I'm actually quite a big fan of the Kvartet sometimes. Then we got a BT-3F. This is a 14-man transport, which is pretty tanky generally speaking. Like, you can add reactive armor, make it 16 health, get the 120 mils of frontal armor going, and then you can also change from like a PKT to a Cord, or even to the autocannon. The autocannon's actually kind of interesting because it's only got 900 meter range, not quite 1,000 like normal autocannons tend to have, and it's not extremely strong against any armor. So yeah, it's just like a chain gun that's useful for support against infantry. I don't think it's necessarily worth it. You're going to use it as a transport, maybe just upgrade to reactive armor, or just don't upgrade it at all. It would be fine. Then we got the BTR-80. Actually a pretty useful transport. The KPVT is like really underrated, I think. Like 30 to 60 millimeters of kinetic penetration is pretty useful for getting through a lot of light armor. And because they're only 45 points and they're amphibious, you can use these to flank quite well and get in people's backline, and you're not really like risking a lot of points in doing so. It can also shoot down helicopters quite nicely because of the 1.25 damage. You can upgrade it easily for 10 points to get the 30 mil. Then it basically just becomes a BTR-82. So then you're looking at like, oh, do I want to add armor? And then you got basically a BTR-82 that's 5 points cheaper. So it's a decent transport in my opinion. And you can also even go as far as to add a grenade launcher as well for an extra 5 points with that autocannon. And then you're looking at quite a lot of decent damage against infantry. 65 points is a steal for this because of how decent it is. It's a little bit slow compared to the BTR-82. I guess that's where the extra cost comes from. It's only 70 speed, but it's still fast enough. PT-76B. I haven't really found a use for them yet, if I'm honest. 30 points. Its default loadout, 1,200 meter range gun. I don't know. Maybe it can do damage, and I just haven't tried it too much yet. But there's a 30 mil loadout, which would basically be doing the same as like a BTR. You can up armor it for an extra bit of health. You've got an upgraded engine in there as well if you don't want it to be so slow, because by default it only goes 45 speed. Can also put a 57 autocannon on it, but this thing fires incredibly slowly compared to something like the 57 on the Kurganets or the T-15. So yeah, it's fun to mess around with. I don't think it's necessarily that good. You could see how you get on using it as cheap as possible. Maybe it's good fast, but I don't know. I haven't tried it personally. T-80BV, it's okay. Again, it struggles from the T-80 line of 520 mil max penetration. If you upgrade it, you do get a better gun. So you do probably want to do that in most cases if you're bringing this unit. You get access to the Invite gem. The BVM 2017 is 16 health. Then you can upgrade it for 17 health and get a bit of extra armor on the sides and rear. And then there's the 2018 variant, which goes to 18 health. So you're paying for, I think, just, yeah, 15 points for 1 health. I don't know if that's worth it. Especially considering, like, you're not getting any more front armor or anything. What would be the best variant here? Probably the BVM 2008. Or even just the BVM. I think at least upgrading it from the base variant, even though the base variant is super cheap, is good, because this damage is just too low. And in most cases, if you're like using coastal and then you have to use the T-80BV, then it's going to be like basically your only tank. Moving on to the Russian mechanized, we start with the BMO-1. The BMO-1 is pretty decent 30 mil vehicle. It's cheap. it has a 30 mil. Yeah, I mean, that's basically it. I mean, you have the ability to be amphibious. You've got the 65 speed. If you upgrade the armor, you get the extra health and the bit extra armor, of course. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's all right for 60 points. It's kind of just lacking the speed of something like a BTR 80. Then we've got the BMP1. BMP1's a weird one because it's only 35 points by default. But when you start upgrading it to something like the BMP1G, it's actually rated kind of highly at them in the high elo at the moment, because the grenade launchers are pretty good at stunning enemy tanks and vehicles. So you just have this in support of a heavier tank, and then the grenade launcher is like panicking the thing you're shooting at with the main tank, whilst the heat is able to kind of potentially flank a vehicle. So I think, you know, the 15-point loadout here with the grenade launcher, with the HGem, which can engage units at range, is kind of useful just to have for 50 points. You can also get the 30mm version for 50 points, but there's no real reason to have the 30mm version when you've got like the main gun plus PKT plus grenade launcher there. So that's probably the go-to. I don't know if up-armoring it's a good idea or not, whether or not that's really going to help you at close range against tanks, which is what you're going to be close to most of the time with this thing. Yeah, I think just the cheap as you can get with that is the way to go. When you're using mechanized, it's all about value for money. BMP2, upgrading this to the Berezok is the way to go. Just again, because of the 4 cornets. Like, it's always to do with the cornets. If you can get cornets, take them. If you can't, then maybe go cheap. It's kind of generally like the way that I think about it. Default armor, you can upgrade again for an extra 16 armor or 16 health and extra armor. I think this is worth it. Like 85 points for a cornet vehicle with 16 health at range is because you're using this at range. The health does help a lot. Yeah. Whereas with the BMP 1PG, you're kind of going to be brawling with it, generally speaking. It's going to be very close to the front line. We got the BMP 3, which just suffers from being a little bit too expensive when you give it upgrades. I think like the base loadout of the BMP 3 is okay, and you can give it reactive armor to increase the health, but the reactive armor costs like 20, and I don't know if it's worth it for the health and the armor there when you're still going to get the same fire support. The main thing that saves APCs and IFVs is their ability to stun the enemy quickly, not the fact that they actually have good armor themselves. So it already has the 3 PKTs and the 30mm if it gets its front facing. You can upgrade it, of course, to have the BMP 3M with the better gun. So it gets the Vishna, which has more range than the default. You also get the 30% ECM. And then you can also go for the Impoka, which has the 57. And I don't know if maybe this would be good to use, but when you compare it for 120 points to something like the Kurganets for 140 points, you don't have that APS, and that can make a big difference. So yeah, something to bear in mind, but I guess it's all right. Again, you've got the Cornet, so if you use it at max range, it's fine, but why would you not just be using the BMP2 if that was how you were going to use it? Right, BTO. It's okay. It's kind of fun to bring sometimes alongside your close range Ognemachiki squads. You can up armor it to get some extra health, just to allow it to get through its RPO thermobaric launcher. I think it's probably worth up armoring it, to be honest, because it's never really going to touch water. Then we got the MTLB ZU-23-2, so it's just an MTLB with the gun on top. You can upgrade it to have this like interesting 30mm, like it's a twin 30mm with 1,500 meter range plus an Igla. Or there's just like the standard ZU-23-2 variant. I haven't had a chance to try this much, but I'd imagine it could be okay. But for 100 points, I'm not sure like when you're going to use it and what you'd bring it with. I actually don't know what it comes with now I think about it. Probably some sort of like mechanized infantry AA unit. You can bring this as a transport. Interesting. Alright, Sturm S. Sturm S is okay for 45 points, honestly. 1,600 meter range, 750 millimeters explosive. It's going to be able to poke quite well range, and it's not really too expensive if it gets artied. You can also upgrade it to have the attacker, which has 1,800 meter range, and again for 60 points. If you put these in tree lines on longer range maps, it can get you some cheeky kills and good value. Then we have the T-72s. Now the T-72s are again lacking because of their penetration. Just generally across the entire line of these tanks, they just don't match up in terms of cost value. Even if you upgrade this to like the T-72B, so you get the extra missile, I mean that's probably as far as you want to go generally with an upgrade on this. You can go the BA, which gets you up to 600 millimeters of penetration, but yeah, I think keeping it as cheap as possible with the T-72 is fine. Having the HGM for 5 points is probably worth it. And then you're just kind of looking at adding the engine, because I don't think the K5 reactive armor is really that useful. Like, it does increase your armor, sure, but it doesn't increase your health like other reactive armors do. So it's not really worth it because of that, I don't think. You've got enough armor by default. The main thing about the upgraded engine is you just got that little bit extra mobility, so enemy tanks aren't able to run away from you as easily as they would at 60 speed there. There's also the T-72B3, again, same problems. Penetration is an issue compared to the other higher value tanks. So like, even if you go B3M, which is like the most expensive variant, and then you upgrade the engine because T-72s are so slow otherwise, you are getting 4 APS, which is nice, but your gun never goes above like 700 millimeters kinetic, which is terrible for 300 points. It really is, especially when you look at like the US and you go to like the SEP V2, and for 250 points you get 800 millimeters of penetration. Like, yeah, I think the T-72B3M Arena is just a waste, a complete waste of points. You're much better off just going as cheap as possible with the T-72s and then using them to overwhelm the enemy. Meteorite, it's okay. I mean, the range is lacking. They need a lot of resupply. I don't think necessarily that this is that good because it's so easy to kill in comparison to something like the Assault Breacher. So the Assault Breacher basically has like armor of an Abrams plus the Miklik, so it's able to get into positions where it can fire this at the 800 meter range, whereas the Meteorite, it doesn't have the armor. Like, even if you upgrade it to have cage armor and more health, it's still going to die to like stray artillery when it's trying to get to the front line. So it's a tough unit to use. It can be useful, and it might be more useful in infantry meta, but yeah, personally I think it's not really worth the 110 points because it gets killed so easily. Okay, moving on to the US units. I should go a bit faster on the US side because there's generally less variations. So starting here with the Amtrak, we have a 21 people carrier, which is very nice. It has not got very good armor by default, but you can upgrade it to have the applique armor, which adds +1 health, or you can go all the way to the SU kit, where it has lots more frontal armor. And generally I would recommend this because otherwise 40 front armor is not really going to be doing you many favors. But 100 millimeters of frontal and side armor is actually very nice. You get a 50 cal and the grenade launcher. The only problem with this is it's kind of slow, but yeah, I think it can be used quite effectively to get things to the front line. I say it's slow, I mean 70 is actually pretty reasonable, and it's still amphibious when it's upgraded, which is nice as well. Then we have the ACVP. This is very much a go-to vehicle at the moment for spamming Marines. You can get 13 men in there, which is basically a full Marine squad. And you can't actually fit Marine Raiders in these, which is interesting, but you can get like the standard Marine squad in them. You can also put like 2 6-man squads in them, so you can put like 2 Rangers Moors in these and stuff like that. And that can be kind of scary because it's 100 speed, as I mentioned already. And when you up armor it, it gets 15 health and extra side. So it's always worth up armoring these, in my opinion, because you're not sacrificing speed to do so. And then you either go grenade launcher or you go autocannon, and it really kind of depends like what your deck is for. So if you're just like using the ACVP as a drop off into urban environments, then the grenade launcher is probably more useful because you're going to be targeting infantry more. But when it comes to the autocannon, that's really good for actually side hitting and rear hitting enemy armor. So if you're going to be a bit more brawly with this and be a bit more aggressive with your AT infantry, then upgrading this to the Bushmaster 2 is certainly worth it because of 75 to 150 millimeters of kinetic penetration. Again, if we go back to looking at something like the T14, it's got 180 millimeter side armor, so and only 100 on the rear. So you're going to be doing full damage in the rear with that autocannon to a T14. And then on the side armor, you're going to be doing slightly less. But yeah, anyway, Bushmaster 2, pretty decent autocannon and nice speedy vehicle. LAV-AT, haven't had a chance to use this too much. I think, you know, if you're keeping it at max range at 1,600 meters, it could be worth it. Just like I say, like the Sturm is worth it with the upgrade. Still 900 millimeters pen, pretty decent. 12 damage. Yeah, it can stay at range and deal damage over time. You can upgrade it for more health, more with smoke. But honestly, if you're using it like a proper HGM vehicle and you're keeping it at range, the extra armor and stuff is not really going to help you that much, other than maybe, I say that, against artillery. But you are then paying the extra 50 points for a unit that's probably going to die to said artillery anyway. Yeah, just keep them cheap and keep them at range. Then we have the M1A1 FEP. So the FEP's interesting because it fires HE, it doesn't have a heat round. So when we look at something like the M1A2, they have heat and HE, and some of them just have heat. Whereas the FEP, it has HE. So you've got the APF SDS, which is 800 mils pen, which is really good. And then you've also got this HE round, which is able to slap about infantry. I will always recommend putting the Tusk on it, because not only do you get extra health and side armor, you also get the second machine gun on the gun there, which is really useful. And then either jammer or trophy protection. Both are good. I mean, I think the jammer's fine for an extra 20 points, and then, you know, trophy is always nice as well. You get 4 active protection. Again, I feel like active protection is maybe a little bit too much at the moment, just in terms of like overall amount of it. You know, it should be like more like 3 or 2, like 3 on the highest level vehicles and 2 on like mid vehicles. Because it can be a little bit oppressive. Like you think, oh, I've hit this APS like so many times and I still haven't been able to get a missile through. And obviously the idea is that you overwhelm APS. But yeah, I think at the moment maybe a little bit much. I don't think APS needs to be like nerfed in any other way other than just availability of it. But anyway, yeah, the FEP, really decent tank. M1A1HC. See, this goes back to heat. So you're not basically doing as much damage against infantry. It goes down from 12 to 9 damage per shot. Obviously, heat can have more penetration value, so it can engage like lighter vehicles a lot nicer. But yeah, definitely upgrade the Tusk again. For 20 points, getting an extra health for a tank is massive because they have the armor that can make good use of it. And then a jammer, maybe. Up to you, probably not worth it most of the time. Then we have the M60. I haven't had a chance to use much of the M60 at the moment, like in this like release. I did use it in the beta quite a lot. It can get some decent value at close range. It comes with APF SDS with 520 meter penetration for 105 points. You know, you use these in support of heavier tanks, and then you're having a good time. But the big problem with this is it's slow. So you need to upgrade its engine for 15 points, and then it's 120 points. And then the upgrade on the gun is not really an upgrade, it's more of a downgrade. You can change it to the CEV, which I think is actually probably more useful as a tank than the M60, because this thing can kind of like one-shot a lot of low health vehicles. So the reason, like I was saying with the BMD2, people don't use these because they have such low armor. Now imagine a CEV shoots at that. It's got 17 damage. It's got 300 millimeters of explosive damage penetration. That one-shots a BMD2. So CEVs, don't underrate them. They're pretty good. They're pretty good. Especially in an infantry meta, which I think it is at the moment. Obviously that could change in the future, so I don't want to like focus on that too much. M113s, they're okay. I mean, it's a 10 man transport with 30 armor. Like, I would probably almost always put a grenade launcher on it because you're going to be throwing it to the front line. You probably almost always want cage armor on it as well. Otherwise it's just going to die too easily. Like 30 armor is just not enough. So you'd want cage armor, you'd want the grenade launcher, and then maybe for 40 points it's a reasonable troop carrier. With 70 speed, 16 armor, 60 front armor, it's okay. It's okay. I think actually we might see them be used more often in the future because they are actually really quite cheap. Assault Breacher. It's the best close range anti-infantry support at the moment. Just because if you put like the grenade launcher on it, yeah, you're going to be slapping infantry in buildings. They're not going to be able to do too much to your front armor. You can use smoke if you need to. You can also upgrade to the reactive armor, and this gives you a whole extra 2 health, which is huge. And then you have extra heat protection on the front as well, which is going to help you against like vampires and stuff like that. Whilst also then just being able to like launch the Miklik at people, and this is actually really tough to kill. So even if bombing strikes come in and stuff, it can survive those and get its Miklik on target. So these Mikliks, by the way, they're technically mine clearing. So they fire off like a projectile. It drags like a rope of C4 behind it, basically, or like explosive, and then they kind of all explode in a line. In the case of like the way it works in game, is it's just like the end projectile hits the mark and creates a big boom. So, yeah, useful. Anyway, AMPV, pretty good, honestly. 50 point transport by default with 12 capacity and 70 speed. It's pretty good with 100 front armor. You can, of course, upgrade the gun to a grenade launcher. You can get the Bushmaster cannon on it, and you can also get the Bushmaster with a javelin. Now, it really depends if you need the javelin or not. It's more map dependent than anything else. Like in an open map, the javelin's useful. In a closer urban environment, it might not be so useful, but because it does have a minimum range of 200 meters. So, if enemy person is smart using like their own heavier armor, like T-72s or something, to brawl you, they're going to push into your 200 meters so that you can't use the javelin on them. You can upgrade this as well with reactive armor. It goes from 14 to 16 health. If you go with the APS as well, you get 2 APS charges. I think generally it's a no-brainer to take the APS and the extra health, and then maybe just the autocannon or plus the javelin if you want to. The reason it's so good is because 2 6-man squads can fit inside it. So you can fit like 2 mech engineers, you can fit like 2 rangers Moors, and you can just hot drop them on whatever is being annoying. Enemy infantry, enemy tanks, whatever. Then we have the M1A2 Abrams. The Abrams is, yeah, pretty good. I mean, generally speaking, Abrams line is solid. Like the M1A2s especially, because they have 720 base penetration at max. And that's really, really good. You can upgrade them easily with the Tusk armor package for an extra 2 health and side armor. So for 100 or 245 points, it's good value. And then you got the SEP, which is basically the same. I think you're getting a slightly better gun. Yeah, slightly better. It's like 40 mils of penetration at the top end. That's what you're paying the extra, what, 15 points for? Or is that more than that? 25 points for. Yeah, I don't know if it's worth it, but the M1A1's probably fine. And you probably don't need to use the normal SEP. But the SEP V2, now that's a different matter because that goes to the 800. And the reason why 800 mils is so important is because it's kind of one of those thresholds that a lot of the high-end Russian tanks have, like particularly like T90s with the 800 millimeters. So having 800 mils of pen means that you get the full damage on target when you hit them. So that's why it's so important. And then of course taking the extra armor here to get the extra health is also really important. You can also go for the trophy, although the way that I like to do this, because if we look at like the SEP V3, the SEP V3 is like the big boy with the 840 mil top end on the penetration. You probably want to max upgrade this with trophy, right, to keep it alive. But having a couple of SEP V2s with also the high penetration, but with just the Tusk 2 armor package is a nice combination, because then you're not putting all your eggs in one basket. Like you can maybe have one of the SEP V3s around, so you have that max pen for if you bump into like a max upgraded T90M or an Armata. But anytime you're not engaging those, just a 280 point set V2 is perfect because it's still got the ability to max pen at like a T90. So yeah, that's the recommendation for me anyway. M2A2, interesting APC. Haven't tried it out too much, but I think you almost always want to put the Busk Armor kit on it for the extra health. And then you can add an extra 10-point jammer on there, which is probably worth it, honestly. 10 points for 30% ECM, 80 points. I could see these becoming more useful and more like prevalent in high-level games because of the value proposition here. You still got a 30mm, you've got a machine gun that can help infantry whilst also being relatively tanky against that infantry at closer ranges. I mean, it's not super tanky. I mean, it's only 250mm of frontal armor at the end of the day, but you've got a TOW there as well, which can pick off heavier targets. The TOW 2A on cheaper vehicles can be really good value. Then you've got the M2A2 Bradley ESV. It trades the TOW 2A for the TOW BB, so you have the BLAM system instead. I have been trying to try this recently because, as I mentioned, currently we're in an infantry meta, so that's where these would be very useful. You'd always upgrade the Busk Armor, and then you'd maybe always bring the jammer as well. And for 70 points, you've got an infantry killer here, which in an urban environment could be really useful, particularly if there's you have two of these, and you're able to throw HE TOWs at high rises in the distance. Then we have the M2A3 Bradley, which can actually get the Busk 3 armor, so it goes from 16 to 17 armor, and then you've got some serious heat protection. So again, always worth upgrading on the Bradleys with that Busk armor. You can also get the Iron Fist, which for 25 points is only 2 active protection charges, but still probably worth having. And then the engine going from 55 to 70 speed is also pretty useful. So then you have a max upgraded M2A4 Bradley, and it's okay. I don't think it's necessarily bad value for money. It's not quite as strong as something like, I don't know, the Kurganits, because you don't have a big enough gun. But the Bushmaster is still pretty strong. 60 to 120mm of penetration. It can still shoot tanks in the rear armor quite well. And then we have the M2A3 Bradley ESV, which is kind of just the more expensive version, as I was saying before. I don't think that bringing this as an expensive variant is a good idea for 110 points, when you can basically get the same for 70 points. Sure, you don't get decent active protection, but the way that this M2A2 is used is at range versus infantry, whereas this variant would be used close up versus infantry because it actually has APS. And so then you're not going to get as much use out of the TOW BB. So I don't think you necessarily need to use this variant. You almost always want to use the M2A2. Then you have the M90. Now I've actually had games where these can get good value, same way like the Sturm S can. Yeah, it's a TOW 2 unit. You keep it at range, hidden somewhere in a tree line, and it will just poke enemy units and sometimes catch them off guard, especially retreating units. You have these big tank brawls, and one of the tanks is retreating from it, and it has no APS charges left, it's got no smoke left, and they're trying to get it back to their supply, and then the TOW 2 just goes boop, and it kills them. That's the sort of thing that this is great for, and then you just get fantastic value out of it because of that. Cage armor and smoke, probably not necessary for 15 points because it's kind of a bit of a throwaway unit for protecting sort of flanks and covering long roads and stuff like that. Airborne infantry, we got the Humvee line. The Humvees are interesting because they can only carry 4 men, which is not ideal. Machine gun, heavy machine gun, grenade launcher. I think for Humvees you always want to go for the machine gun because you want to be able to shoot helicopters if they get caught in a pinch. B-kit armor's probably not really worth it. It does increase health and armor, but it makes them kind of slow, and the benefit of the Humvee generally is that it's quite fast, so you don't want to slow it down. Humvee TOW used a lot of the same way as the M90. It just doesn't have any armor whatsoever. I mean, it's half the armor of the M90, not that makes much of a difference in the grand scheme of things. Yeah, just keep it as a normal TOW. You can put smoke on it if you want to protect yourself against enemy HGMs coming your way, but again, pretty much a throwaway unit. And TOW B Overfly, it is a top attack, So yeah, I mean, maybe worth it with the upgrade to do some damage against heavier tanks, but most of the time, because these fire like one by one, they're going to get defeated by APS unless you're lucky and you are hitting like a retreating tank, like I said before. In which case, you might as well just have the TOW 2A anyway, because it's gonna penetrate and kill any regardless. Then we have the M1301 ISV. Might as well upgrade it for a grenade launcher, I think, in this case, most of the time, because it's going to be a fast frontline transport that you use at like the start of the game. You can carry eight men, so you see like airborne units used in these a lot, and like airborne infantry. I mean, I know it comes in the airborne infantry tab, but the airborne with new generation weapon systems will get dropped off in these, and then you'll have that grenade launcher to help you engage at range as well. If you're going for like a closer range, the grenade launcher is still useful. So yeah, you're most of the time with this transport going to be around infantry, and so the grenade launcher is more useful than a heavy machine gun, which is then going to have more penetration for dealing with vehicles and helicopters. Yeah, good transport, very fast. M55 Sheridan. I think a lot of people see these as a bit of a meme, but to be honest, they can do a lot of damage. They have 15 damage with 155 millimeters explosive damage, penetration. So they're going to be, slotting BMD2s still, and like lower health BTRs and stuff like that pretty nicely. You're also going to be providing decent fire support, because it does have the 50 cal. It's got the M240. You can also give it an 80 gem if you want as well. I generally put it on because it can be useful for picking off stuff at range, but yeah, with no 80 gem, it's fine as well. Good infantry fire support tank. Then we have the M8 AGS. This is a very nice vehicle if you upgrade the gun. Always upgrade, I think, to the 120, because then you get a gun with basically the best gun in the game, the M2A2 Set V3 gun, on a light chassis. It doesn't have much in the way of armor, but this gun certainly packs a punch. So if you have it in support, like say you're running an armored airborne deck, and then you have like a Set V3, you might not even need Set V2s, because you've got the M8 Thunderbolt that is there to help you hit those heavier targets when they overextend. Of course, it can also fire from 1,400 meters itself. So yeah, kind of a scary gun. You can upgrade it all the way with extra applique armor, so you can give it like extra extra 1 or 2 health with these different armors. With the Iron Fist, you are losing a health, but you add the APS. Now this really just kind of depends like what positions you're usually going to be using it in. But if you're using it as anti-tank support, then just the reactive armor upgrade is probably your best bet for the extra health to keep it alive for longer, rather than going all the way for the Iron Fist. Then we have the Striker. The Booker is an interesting one, because I've seen people use both the M35 and 50mm. I think I've become more of a fan of the 50mm autocannon. I think the 50mm autocannon is just really useful for cleaning up sort of medium and light targets, particularly things like the Kurganets, for example. The Booker can be useful for engaging those because it has enough kinetic penetration to get through the front armor. It's going to struggle a bit more against something like a Barbarous. And what was the other one? The K-17 is another good target for the Booker. So yeah, I think the Booker with the 50mm is great in the current meta, but sometimes the 105 could be useful, I guess, for helping flanking tanks, because it's reasonably quick for a tank. Not any different really to the Thunderbolt. There's a situation where if you don't have access to the Thunderbolt, you probably use the Booker with the 105 instead to support, like if you're doing like Armored Striker or I don't know, US Marine Corps with Striker or something like that. Then the Booker with the 105 can support the heavier tanks. But otherwise, I think the 50mm kind of does the same thing and more effectively, and the APS is probably worth it. I was trying them without the APS for quite a while, but I think the APS is worth it, because most of the time you're going to be close up with the 50. If you're using the 105, then maybe don't bring the Iron Fist. With the Battleship, I think a lot of people look at this as like a meme, but unironically, I think it's probably the most efficient, one of the most efficient infantry killers in the game. You stack it up with triple grenade launcher, keep it at range, so keep it at the 100 meters range, and use it to rip infantry out of high rises. That's what it's really good for 50 points. And it's cheaper than basically any infantry squad it's going to kill. I have been memeing a setup where I run like double toe 2, and I feel like in pairs, you know, there is an argument to be made that this could be useful, but it's just too expensive, I think, and too easy to kill. But in all honesty, triple grenade launcher setup behind your tanks as you're moving on and attacking a point, I reckon could be really useful. Then we have the Striker HGem, again just a tow vehicle, kind of an expensive tow vehicle honestly, but you're kind of paying for the speed when you don't need it. The tow 2B overfly is okay, it's just like the same as I mentioned before. It's like in most cases the normal tow is doing the job. You can add reactive armor for an extra 16 health. It does slow it down a bit. And then there's also the APS. I don't think you need any upgrades on units like these. Generally speaking, you want to keep them as cheap as possible because they're generally going to be furthest away from the fight anyway. Striker ESV. You would bring... I like bringing these a lot because I have them with the combat engineer combination. So combat engineers can fit in these, and then you have them with like a grenade launcher and then max upgrade, or you have like a grenade launcher and javelin. I think honestly I should probably like just run them with the grenade launcher rather than the javelin as well. But yeah, it's a nice solid fast transport, 80 speed with the reactive armor, 100 without. So there is that argument to be made. Do you need the extra health instead of the speed? But most of the time, if you're dropping off combat engineers, you probably do need the extra health because you're going to be right on top of the enemy. Yeah, that's why I use this. And then this is basically the same, the Striker ICV. It just can carry different troops. The other nice thing about this is it can have the Dragoon, so you can run it as a Bushmaster 2 vehicle, pretty cheap actually. Like 65 points for a Bushmaster 2 is an absolute steal. Or you can have it with like the javelins on it as well. But I think like just an upgraded 16 health Dragoon for 80 points with the Bushmaster is probably really good value if you keep it at range, 1000 meters. And you can put a trophy on it if it's going to be like thrown into the fire at close range if you're dropping off infantry into buildings and stuff. Then you've got the Striker multiple gun system. This is used again for like ganging up on enemy tanks. So it doesn't have like a crazy gun, you know, it's only 520 mils of kinetic pen. But if you have a couple of these either side of like a heavier tank, and then when you're engaging a heavy tank, you run these in at the enemy, you can overwhelm. And it's kind of like, I would like to use these in pairs almost always, so that one's always shooting into the side armor of the enemy. Yeah, that's kind of how I like to use them. And the machine gun's probably more useful in most situations than the grenade launcher. Oh, actually I say that, no, the grenade launcher is probably going to be better, because when you're going up against vehicles like tanks, you want to be able to stun them a bit extra, so the grenade launcher is definitely important there. And then reactive armor is probably the way to go. Do you need APS? Probably not. So that would be the setup. Grenade launcher with reactive armor. Finally, the Spec Ops Warpig. It's a pretty fast, big transport. It's basically what it's for. You ferry units to the front line with it. You don't really want to use it with upgrades, I don't think. And the bunker buster's not too useful. I guess maybe you could keep it at range and poke like units in high rises with it, but you're making it 60 points. The Fletcher, again, it's fun to use, like don't get me wrong, the Fletcher's fun, but I don't think it's like overly effective for its price. Grenade launcher is always a good choice. Machine gun maybe not so much in this case, because you're not going to really be targeting vehicles or helicopters with it. And if you are, it's dead. So yeah, that's the problem with the Fletcher as well, is like it can shoot helicopters, which is kind of interesting, but if it shoots a helicopter, the helicopter is going to turn and sneeze on it and then it's dead. So yeah, the only real way that I can see this being used is like as cheap as possible, or maybe with the bunker buster to provide infantry support at range with the HE. And there you have it. That's all of the vehicles. I'm sure there's going to be stuff I missed. If you have any like tips and tricks and stuff you want to add, feel free to put them in the comments. If there's like any particularly good posts, I will pin them as well. Yeah, but hopefully that has sort of given you an idea of what each of the units do, what they're good for, whether or not I think they're good or not. And yeah, I think the biggest thing to take away from this is really just like the whole idea around tanks and IFVs. IFVs, you generally want to use them for their ATGMs more than their like fighting capability at close range, unless you're utilizing the grenade launcher, which is then it becomes a close range thing, right? And then in terms of tanks, you're looking at that like Russian armor versus US armor dynamic, where I think the Russian armor, unless you're going top end, should be cheap in order to overwhelm high-level American tanks. Yeah, there's just some general concepts that I touched on, throughout this video that I think are worth noting. But overall, yeah, a big information dump. So I apologize if that was a bit much, but there is a lot to go through there, and I did just want to get it done all in one go. So yeah, if there's things you think I missed or you disagree with or whatever, feel free to put it in the comments. It's absolutely fine. All right. Anyway, that's all. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.